Paul, at least Reverend Jesse Jackson is in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and in Brooklyn Center up in Minnesota. Of course, we are preparing to hear the closing remarks of the defense and the prosecution in the Derek Chauvin murder trial. Who was responsible for the death of George Floyd? We want to hear from you. Call us at 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673, and let's talk this morning. We're going to talk with, we have a tremendous panel with us today, but we're going to be talking with people who are on the ground. They're on the ground in Minnesota. And so we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. What are you expecting? There is uh, there's a lot going on, everybody. There's a lot going on. There's a New York Times article that says that throughout the trial, since the beginning of the trial, since the day before the trial, the killings by police of Americans have just mounted, have mounted, have mounted. And so we're going to talk about that at least. Since testimony began March 29th, at least 64 people have died at the hands of law enforcement nationwide, with Black and Latino people representing more than half of the dead. That's according to the New York Times today. So we want you to call us at 1 594 HOPE, 1 594 4673. And everyone, if you are watching us on Facebook Live on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page, Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page, or the Santita Jackson and Friends page, please like and share. Create some watch parties. We're going to have some great information that we want you to spread around. And of course, my YouTube channel, The Santita Jackson Show. Please like and subscribe there, and please share this show. This week's Twitter poll: only one juror needs to doubt that Derek Chauvin intended to kill George Floyd. Will Chauvin be found guilty or not? Now, thus far, 59% of you say that he will be found guilty. 27% of you say not guilty. 15% of you just don't know. Wow. 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. That is the number that you should be calling so that we can hear from you. And of course, if you go to your iHeart app, you can go to at Patriot AM 1150 or WOLDC or WOL in Baltimore, and just key in Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. It should take you to a radio station that's carrying us live right now, or a station that will carry us the uh, delayed broadcast of this show. Jury deliberations are set to begin in this trial, in Derek Chauvin's trial in the death of George Floyd, this week after closing arguments tomorrow. And now Minneapolis and other American cities are preparing for protests and possible civil unrest. This verdict is one of the most closely watched, not just in the United States, but all around the world. Security has been stepped up around Minneapolis and near the Brooklyn Center Police Headquarters. Uh, wow, Brooklyn Center. Who would think? What happened with Dante? Right. We're going to be talking with his brother shortly. Chicago's been on edge. We saw a 13-year-old boy who had his hands raised in surrender, Adam Toledo, and he was killed by police. What is going on, everybody? We want to hear from you. In the meantime, Reverend Jackson, before we go to break, we want to hear from you. You are in Minneapolis, St. Paul, with some of the great leadership that they have on the ground in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Reverend Jackson?
Good morning, Santita. How are you today?
It's wonderful hearing your voice. What did you see yesterday? We saw you outside of Cup
Well, I went
Foods.
back to the place George Floyd was killed once more, just to soak up the atmosphere and people around there walking around with a sense of joy and sadness at the same time, but it's becoming quite a national scene. Then went out to the site where Dante was killed, out to the police headquarters, really, and met his brother. Talked to his mother. I'll meet with her the day at 2:00. So we think that we must have a presence here to identify with this struggle.
Well, you know what? We're going to talk about that with some of the people who are doing so much on the ground. Indeed, Pastor Jerry McAfee, senior pastor of the New Salem Missionary Baptist Church in Minneapolis, St. Paul, is with us today. Indeed, that's the most prominent Black church in that area. Spike Moss, who has been a leader and organizer with our youth and with people on the ground in Minneapolis, St. Paul, for more than 50 years. Attorney C.K. Yes, Reverend Jackson?
Last week, it was not reported the guy that shot the brother in the back 7 times in Kenosha walked away free. military in Kenosha last night to repeal in 2 inches. Kenosha is a haunted town.
Well, Reverend Jackson, we are going to talk about that today. And so let's get right to it, everybody. Call us at 1 594 HOPE, 1 594 4673. Let's talk about what's going on in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and all around the country. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes.
Sing a little message out to those of y'all who feel like you're struggling. Yeah, it's a simple song. Yeah. La, da, 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 da. Yesterday, a man said to me, he said, how can you smile when your world is crumbling down? I said, here's my secret. When I wanna cry, I take a look around and I see that I'm getting by, and I hold on. Hold on. Change is coming. Change is coming. Hold on. Hold on. Don't you worry. Don't worry about it.
Things around, but this is great. Thank you, Reverend.
Yes.
Reverend, do you remember the young man's name? Mr. Wright's brother?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, it's Santita. Who am I speaking to?
Me, your daddy.
Okay. Wow. Dad,
Yeah, baby.
I need more energy this morning. I know you're tired. I'm only going to keep you for the first hour, okay?
Okay.
Because you need to go rest, okay? So you can do the rest of your day. But I can hear a little bit of fatigue in your voice, and I don't want to wear you out.
Boy.
No, I know that you're very energized, but I also know what I know. So, were you able to reach? Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I
So,
got it. Nutritious food coming.
no, you don't. Come
Yes, I
on,
do.
Pastor McAfee. No, you don't.
I got it greens cooked with turkey. We're grilling the chicken. Thank you very much.
What?
Nah.
Okay. But I know there's a coconut cake in there. That's all right.
No,
I'm not mad.
no sweet. No sweet. And daughter, your daughter, the one who said it.
Look, he's gonna look at one of those sisters and he's gonna say, "Now you gotta give me a little something."
We ain't gonna even have no dessert around. See that?
Gonna look at, you know, some fruit, something. But I just, we just need him to be. Thank you so much for taking care of him,
Yeah, we got it.
Dad. You're gonna eat well though. You know you are,
Ain't much.
huh?
Ain't much.
I know you are. So we're very excited, and so I want to say hello to everybody.
Hello.
Were we able to reach him? No. Okay. I'm sorry. So, Mr. Moss,
Yeah.
it's wonderful hearing your voice.
Good to hear yours again.
Okay. So, Pastor McAfee, Mr. Moss, Reverend Jackson, we've got Attorney Hoffler on hold. If there are any legal issues that come up, but we certainly want you all to set the table for us about what's happening there. Did you all see this New York Times article? Shall I send it to you, Pastor McAfee and Mr. Moss?
No, I haven't seen it.
Throughout the trial over George Floyd's death, killings by police have mounted. Since testimony began on March 29th, at least 64 people have died at the hands of law enforcement nationwide, with Black and Latino people representing more than half of the dead. As of Saturday, the average was more than 3 killings per day. I'll open with that.
Okay, I'll text you the phone number, okay? All right. Ooh, yeah.
Hey, everybody, the great sounds of blackness on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. We need to talk with you today about the Derek Chauvin trial. Derek Chauvin. It is not the George Floyd trial, although it seems that George Floyd has been on trial. But there's a lot going on. Of course, we have been shocked, Reverend.
Where the sound of blackness from?
They're from there, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Gary Hines.
Where are his friends from?
Minneapolis, St. Paul. Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, the time.
Where's Spike from?
Minneapolis, St. Paul. But he's the guy. Well, he's the guy who kind of helped to manage all of them. But
Mississippi River originates from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Absolutely. But Reverend, why don't you respond to this? This is from the New York Times. Since testimony began on March 29th, at least 64 people have died at the hands of law enforcement nationwide, with Black and Latino people representing more than half of the dead. As of yesterday, the average was more than 3 killings per day.
The difference is the camera. It's been happening all the while. If Floyd had died without the camera, it's been justified killing of him.
Wow. Well,
never has a white been indicted for killing a black in Minnesota in the history of the state. And of course, it's hard to prove, but letting him die in real time,
Absolutely. Well, Reverend, let's go to Pastor Jerry McAfee no worries. I want to get through this because we've got this power panel who you've brought together. And we want them to set the table for America, because many people are tuning in from all around the world. We need to know what you're expecting. What does it feel like? We're seeing that there's increased security in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and now Brooklyn Center. First, you, Pastor McAfee.
Well, it's anticipating what they know that they've helped create. That, as Dr. Jackson said earlier, the only difference between now and back then, from L. Nelson on down, is it's finally being exposed. We've spoken about it for years. Spike has spoken about it much longer than me. But now America is getting a chance to see exactly what we've been dealing and going with. And if you continue to oppress and depress a people, it won't be long before that match is lit and it gets uncontrollable. And the thing that we have to try and do to the best of our ability is not destroy where we live. And so, as I shared with you before, my prayer is that the verdict would come in finding Chauvin guilty, because if not, out of all that we try to do, it's kind of hard being in a position to where you really kind of struggling with your own self and being destructive and holding that under, and not joining and trying to give clear guidance to people, and you feeling their pain on the real. And I've been out there. Our people was out there last night trying to help to monitor it. And so the tension is just high now, since the trial is coming to an end.
Spike Moss, your thoughts?
Yes, ma'am. I was thinking what Mac is saying. Although I would say his people that were out there last night, every one of the groups
Hold
worked
on
really,
one
really
second.
hard.
Hold on one second. We're trying to isolate who has dropped. Okay. Okay, very good. Okay. Spike Moss. Oops.
There you go.
Okay. Okay. There you go. That's all
What I
right.
was
Spike
what I was
Moss.
saying to second what Reverend McAfee was saying, the people and his people did do a good job last night. It was hard, but they spread themselves out. They walked. They talked. They gave a calminess to the people who were out there in great numbers. I was glad that Rev came because I thought in my mind he would make a difference. And sure enough, without a microphone, his very presence, there were smiles on faces. He will have to admit they were trying to hug him and touch him and trying to honor him and respect him and tell him what they thought of him and how long they've watched him. I seen the effect that I wanted and that I thought we would get from that. And I did go up on the National Guard. He could see them. I went down on the courthouse so he could see that, the government center, so he could see the forts that they're building, that we all wish, like Reverend McAfee, that we win. But these people are building this up like they're sure they're going to go against us. I mean, it was like all-out war, what I showed your father yesterday. And the people's hope is in the fact that they are still marching. They actually have went to the person that put the charges on that officer's house last night and protested in great numbers while they were in front of the police station in great numbers. I mean, they're determined that this be their victory. And as Reverend Jesse Jackson said, I told him day one, since 1966, we have not won one case. This will be it. This will be it if we make it.
Pastor McAfee, what is the mood there? I mean, we're seeing Kimberly Potter, the officer who shot and killed Dante Wright. We see her home. It's been walled off. I mean, concrete barriers, a fence.
I wrote a post earlier in the week, and I said that would it not be nice that if the African in America could have their lives fenced off and boarded up and National Guard security against all that comes against us. And so we are left to face the forces of evil, for the most part, naked and ill-equipped. And then they wonder why we mad.
Wow.
A lady asked me one day at a meeting of the city council, and what was amazing was it was a black lady. She wanted to know, well, Reverend, why are you so mad? And I looked her in her eye and I said, why the hell ain't you mad? When you can see the oppression of your people at the level that you do, the problems from within and without, and you're not incensed. It takes every grip of training and skill that my mama and my daddy put in me not to mount up and go ham. I forget what writer was who said, for the African American, we should be in a constant sense of rage. And that's what you see. And it's quiet now. Again, watch those crowds. Black folk in mass ain't showed up yet. That verdict go wrong, it's going to be real different.
Well, we've all. Yes, Reverend. Yes, Reverend.
I don't give a conclusion. I don't want to put the comment in the atmosphere. Clearly, there's a sense of tension in this place. Unusual. Last night, when Spike and I went to the armored, police headquarters, the young people are so warm. I tend to think that some of the Roswell is coming from a foreign element. When I was in here marching last year, before I was killed, the Berlin police headquarters down surgically, that was not black, that was white. More white kids out there than black kids out there fighting back.
Yep.
There's a sense of transformation taking place in the man in America. That's the good news.
Reverend, we have someone who you all have embraced and who you brought into our midst. Indeed, we're pleased to meet him, but we're so sad about the circumstances. Dante Wright's brother, Dimmick, is joining us. Uh, Mr. Wright, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
We're honored to have you. Reverend Jackson?
He's such a tripper little fella, Santita. He reminded me of Al so many years ago. He is such a good natured guy. He got on the phone with his mother. I talked to his mother last night. His house is at 2 o'clock and eat.
Well, let me. There's so much pain, and we are all struggling uh, with the death of your brother. First, how is your family doing, and what 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 do you see, Mr. Wright?
My family's doing good right now. We actually are all still, trying to take everything in, um, and what do you mean by like what are we seeing? Like what are we
What are
seeing?
you seeing? Because I read an interview, and I want to ask you because I don't want to just go on the interviews. Your
Right.
parents were saying that this can't have been a mistake. You
Oh
can't
no 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 no
mistake a
no.
taser for a gun or a gun for a
Yeah,
taser.
I mean, you don't. That's a big mistake if you ask me. You
Mm.
know the difference between, a taser weighs, as much as a pair of glasses. I take a pair of glasses, like one of my friends said, and you put them on a scale, they weigh 9 ounces. It's the same weight as a taser. And you pick up a gun, a Glock 17, it's 1.5 pounds. The same one my brother was killed with. So I mean, your left and your right, your strong and your weak hand. The colors. You held the gun in your hand for.
And I misstated. Your last name is Bryant. Your last name is Bryant.
Yeah,
Please,
it's
Mr. Bryant.
Brian. Yeah.
But let me ask you this: help us to know your brother. So many of us saw our brothers, our sons, our nephews, our godchildren when we saw him. Help us to know him. Who was Dante Wright?
Dante Wright was your average, you know, man. I mean, he's 20 years old, I can say, but he to me he was, my favorite brother, and him, Dallas and Marcus. I'm the oldest out of 7 kids, so Dante was somebody that could walk in a room and don't even really have to say much and make everybody smile. He was the yellowest person alive, like. he loved spades. He was never the six and the possible. If he said what he had, he always gonna make sure he got his books up. He's just your average child. Like I said, he just they took something very special. Me and my brothers and sisters were grieving hard, but we feel more bad for my mom and my dad because that was their youngest boy.
Mhm.
So Dante is it's just words can't even explain who Dante was.
Of course.
So
And he leaves behind a child. Wow. Yes, Reverend Jackson. what is happening, what is happening. And we are honored, especially, to have Dante Wright's big brother, Dimmick Bryant, on with us today. And so we want to thank you for being with us. Mr. Bryant, talk to us about the next steps. How, first of all, how are your parents? How are they faring? This has got to be so, so difficult for them.
Um, my parents right now are doing as best as they can do. Uh, we always been taught to always keep our head high and always stay strong no matter what situation we're in.
Mhm.
And my brother is like now, you know, is a piece of history.
Yes.
So with all the love and support we get from the city and with all the love and support we get actually from the world, it makes everything just a little bit easier knowing that we got, everybody behind us and everybody behind my family. And the next steps for us is actually, as we speak, I've been actually, down at the protest every day. I've been, at his memorial every day. And the next step for us is to, everything with the courts now. So we don't accept the manslaughter in the second degree. We don't accept that. That's not enough for us. No matter what justice we get, no matter if it's 100 years, 20 years, 30 years, no matter what we get for Dante Wright is just not good enough for us. You guys made the biggest mistake that, somebody could make, and, that taking my brother and our loved ones away from us. We'll never be able to see my brother again. And
We,
no matter what conviction we get, it's still not good enough for my brother.
Your mother is so strong.
she is, but but no mother should have to go through that. We're always talking about how strong these mothers, and we had to assert the fact that Dante Wright had a father who was in his life. I mean, this is a family, and I want to know from Attorney C.K. Hoffler, the president of the National Bar Association, more than 65,000 lawyers that she represents. What is the path to justice? We're seeing. I mean, as Reverend Jackson pointed out, as Pastor McAfee, as Mr. Moss pointed out, getting an indictment in in this state, and quite frankly in Chicago and all over, is historic. But where do we go from here? I mean, are these settlements? And if you get settlements, will you be able to have a fair and just trial? I mean, what's the pathway to justice for Dante Wright's family?
Well, good morning, everyone. Well, the path for justice is justice, and it will start really with the Derek Chauvin trial. What happens in that trial is going to have a devastating impact, one way or the other, on Dante Wright's case. It definitely will. So the path to justice is first getting justice, and I hate to say this, but the cases are linked in the court of public opinion and in the legal sense. They're linked because they both involve excessive use of force, police brutality in a similar communities that are side by side. So first, getting the justice in the case that's pending, where there was an excellent presentation by the prosecution, overwhelming evidence, and seeing what the results of that are. But for Dante Wright's family, and I'm so sorry and extend my condolences to the family, to his brother. The path to justice is you always have two paths. You have the civil case, which is a civil suit, which is completely separate from the case that the prosecutor would bring. That's one path to justice. But ultimately, accountability for the police officer that killed your brother is going to happen, and only going to happen, through the criminal justice system. So those are the options. And so what we have to look at overall in that community, and with the overwhelming support for Dante Wright's family, we have to make sure that everybody's clear on the different paths and don't get them confused, but that the Derek Chauvin case is going to have a strong impact on the justice that Dante Wright's family will receive. In my
Let me ask you a question. I think they should not be allowed to resign. They should be fired. To resign to keep all the benefits. They're fired. It's different.
Well, Reverend, if I understand your question, is your question going towards the police officer that shot and killed Dante Wright?
Yes.
Well, first of all, this notion that she can have law enforcement and fences built up. Where were the law enforcement and fences built up to protect Dante Wright? Where were those people protecting Dante Wright? That's the question. And I don't feel that she should be allowed to just walk around freely, but that is the system of justice that we have right now. And that's why there's got to be the passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Because otherwise, you're going to have, and I pray that Derek Chauvin is convicted. I pray that happens. If he is not convicted, what I see as an outsider looking in, the level of desperation and the oppression that this community and all of us will feel will be astounding. And it's going to reinforce it without some comprehensive federal measures and policing reform that are also embraced and implemented in the states and localities. The numbers will continue to increase. It was not shocking to me, Santita and Reverend Jackson, when you mentioned at the top of the hour about this article where you have police brutality and killings at the hands of police have increased. Law enforcement is more frustrated, more upset. The police unions are, I believe, promoting this narrative. And so they're just going wild throughout the country because of what they're seeing. And so there needs to be reform right away so they understand the rules of engagement going forward. And the public has an expectation of rules of engagement.
The white race supremacists are disguised as police and sheriffs. They're disguised. I think Spike is right about that.
Madam, a suggestion, Attorney Paul, because I think this would help us on the street level and in our fight. One, I think we need to make sure that our people understand the differences in the laws as to why they have not been charged, both Derek Chauvin as well as Potter, with first-degree murder. Number two, I think that based off the laws of the state of Minnesota as it sits, I don't think they can even get a second degree against Potter. That's why they're going to need a third. And this also shows and shares with us the need to be involved in the legislative process because they got laws. Many of the county attorneys, some of them are certainly rotten, but they're not going to try to put no charges that will not stick. First-degree murder, based off what I know about first-degree murder, won't hold in this case. And I think if we got lawyers who can help, walk us through these things, and then the right pressure can be put, because right now they're not going to charge her with first-degree murder. It won't happen.
No, I agree. I think you make an excellent point. And it is something that in many respects doesn't make sense. But you have to realize the same people who are benefiting from the lack of accountability are the ones that more than likely were involved in the drafting of the laws. Yeah. So when I talk about reform, that's why I said on a federal level, a state and local level. And by the way, we need to stop electing legislators and political people who are not advancing the interests of the community. They're sitting there. They have the ability to modify and to put in place changes. But if we're electing people who are not going to do that, we need to stop electing people who are not going to do that. Because we know someone's record is how they vote, what they feel, what they think is clear when they're elected, no matter what they say when they're campaigning. And so I think we have to really, really stop being complacent, and I'm not saying everyone is, when it comes to that, because then what you see at the end is exactly what you're getting when the laws make it so that it would be virtually impossible based on the facts as we know them. I'm just trusting my eyes. And again, I do not believe a single word uttered by the police officer, the former police officer that killed Dante Wright, I think she knew what she was doing. I don't, and she just has a quick response in terms of, what she did. I don't believe it was accidental. I believe it was intentional. I don't even believe that a taser was appropriate under those circumstances. None of the above. So I think there could be sufficient evidence, but we don't know all the evidence at this point, and that's why I'm holding out that there could be a greater charge that is levied against her down the line. All we see is what we know that's in the public record, because I believe they haven't completed their investigation. But I think the pressure needs to continue where the family, and I'm happy to see the families represented by one of my members, Ben Crump, one of our past presidents, and that you will be unrelenting and not let up. And the community will be unrelenting, and that there will be continued support, because it is only with that support and a coordinated effort that there will be a grand understanding that you all mean business, and that they will push and push and push and delve into all the facts, and perhaps a greater charge will be levied, but it's got to be supported by the evidence, because the laws on the books can be tough.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll make an observation about the contradictions here. I got back with George Floyd was killed yesterday. The store, say he charged the $20 bill. Mm-hmm. I thought it was amusing. They're still operating the same store, accusing them to pay $20 bill. They call the police. They're one of the most profitable stores in the community.
Reverend, what did you just say?
The store where George Floyd was allegedly having a $20 false bill. Mm-hmm. It's still open and functioning.
They're still open and functioning.
In our community. Yeah, that is a travesty.
Well, please.
I thought we boycotted closed.
Well, hold on. Spike Moss. Reverend, hold on. Spike Moss, why don't you speak to that?
People call the police are still in business.
Absolutely. Reverend, let's let Spike Moss and Pastor McAfee speak to that. Spike Moss?
Well, I tried to explain to Reverend, North Minneapolis is the side of town that up until the day Floyd died, they had 6 rebellions. The day that Floyd died, they got one more, but the South Side got one, which was their first, and St. Paul got one. But the North Side is where the movement itself, the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power movement, was birthed. So if it had happened over here to Rev's point, yeah, they would have burnt the store down. But we're on the South Side that for the first time in their history, they rebelled. That was the difference. Also, I'm listening to everyone, and I really want to thank our lawyer who's on here, because she's extremely accurate, and so was Reverend McAfee. However, here's our dilemma of what I've witnessed since 1966. Not only do they get on there and write the laws, and they are law enforcement influence, which they are right now, but remember, we had a secret grand jury for the majority of my career. The secret grand jury, you never really know, do they exist? You never even know, do they meet, where they meet, when they meet, what evidence is brought to them. But every single year they came back with no bill. Now, what speaks to what my sister was saying, our lawyer, and I'm glad she's on here, yes, we send people to Washington to get full of themselves and never think to put that pen to paper to make a difference all these years. But here in Minnesota, we have the same problem as the Capitol. Republicans ain't going to vote for it, and the Democrats don't bring it up, even though we believe in the Democrats. The Democrats are in charge of every inner city in America where we're struggling and going without respect or protection. So when you understand that, we do have to do what she said. We got to let some people with some backbone that's willing to put some pen to paper to change it, because we have no protection under the law in Minnesota. And let me go one more. I said about a week ago on your show, we had cases like Sale Scott, where they claim he came at them and they were forced to shoot him in the chest. We proved through lawyers, we proved down there in Hennepin County that he had his hands in the air, and in the back of his hands was his skull stuck in his hands and his brain matter. Mm-hmm. So when you have that much clarity and you still can't win, that means that the racism is so overwhelming, their own legal system cannot honor or protect us as a people in this state. The other thing she said is so important is we are obligated to keep that pressure up. When I met Reverend McAfee, I approached him to say, I need a preacher to stand up for the people. I need a preacher to get out front because it's a spiritual warfare. And he understood it and he told me he could do it. He's been standing up ever since. And that's what we got to do. We got to stand up until that day because from the outside is all we have left to fight. Everything inside insulates all the madness that they choose to do. I mean, we had Reverend McAfee will tell you, we had officers riding around in their car selling drugs out the squad car. We had officers running around here robbing drug dealers, taking the jury their money and their dope. But we also had officers going to the house with warrants, would take your car, your motorcycle, your boat. They got busted. But nothing has changed in the system from one in America to the other. Now, the other thing you said that's extremely
Oh, hold
important.
that thought because I'm up against a hard break, but I want you to speak to that because
Okay.
that also speaks to Derek Chauvin and the deep personal. It seemed like his killing of George Floyd was very personal, and then we find out there's so many connections that we're seeing here. We're going to get some closing thoughts from Reverend Jackson and from Mr. Bryant, the brother of Dante Wright, on the other side of the break. But you know, Spike Moss and Pastor McAfee are painting a picture for us and letting us know what's really happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Brooklyn Center up in Minneapolis. Minneapolis, St. Paul, Brooklyn Center in Minnesota, where the Mississippi River begins and ends and begins. Oh
Northern
boy.
Mississippi, Northern Mississippi,
Wow,
Northern
wow.
Mississippi.
North Mississippi. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes.
The troubles of life weigh you down. Just lift your head up. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
always take you all off during the break. Sometimes I have some things that I really don't want to be heard over this. Just do okay. So thank you so much. Stand by. Stay tuned for the second hour of Keep Hope Alive. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Please go to Facebook, the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page, of course, Santita Jackson Show on YouTube. And throughout the week, we need your support at Rainbow Push 773 Freedom or rainbowpush.org. But we've been honored to have the brother of Dante Wright, his big brother, Dimmick Bryant. Your closing thought in this final minute, Mr. Bryant.
Um, I just, you know, we can. Me and my family are going to continue to need the support. And we know we have a lot of people that's behind us, and
we are with you. We are
yes,
with you.
yes, for sure, for sure. And when I've seen how many people that's been out at the protests for the past couple of nights, it's been really, really, really helpful with everything because I know it's just not us; it's everybody in the world and everybody in my state that I was born and grew up in. So we just thank everybody for the love and support, and we will get a murder charge out of this case.
That is what we are looking for. Pastor McAfee, 1 minute.
Uh, Cup foods have been there for a minute, and as you said, they grow high. And we did a little protest against them a year ago, slowing everything down. And I've talked with the owners, and they want to sell. They want to try to be real, get that spot back, and make it a permanent monument. And Bro Bryant, anything y'all need from New Salem, just holler. His good friend DeMarlo is one of my little cousins. So whatever we can do, let us know.
Yes, sir.
We're going to make sure that we connect you during the break as we go into the second hour of Keep Hope Alive. Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Santita and friends, good morning again. Rainbow Bush needs your support. Today we have troops on the ground in Quincy, Illinois, where a young lady, 18 years old, a student attacked by a 250-pound white man. He choked her. We rallied with them yesterday. We're here in Minnesota today. Ground troops in Atlanta and in Texas because the Voting Rights Act in Texas. We need your support. Please call Rainbow Push Day 773 Freedom. RainbowPush.org. We need your support today. Help us help you before you help us. Thank you, Santita.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And we love you, and we do need your support. I tell you what, freedom is not free. That is something that Reverend Jackson has been teaching us down through the years, Pastor McAfee, and that you cannot ride to freedom on Pharaoh's chariot. The reason we're able to be on the ground and do the things that Reverend Jackson is able to do, and Pastor McAfee and Spike Moss, is because you support it. And it takes your money, it takes your energy, it takes your coming by the building at 930 East 50th Street. We need volunteers. We're a volunteer driven organization, just as Pastor McAfee's church and all of it. We need you. We need you to come together. And certainly we are praying for Dante Wright's family. We're so pleased and honored to have been able to hear and feel the strength of his big brother, someone upon whom he could depend. And thank God for the life of Dante Wright. It has not been taken in vain. We're going to learn from this. We're going to get better together. More of Keep Hope Alive in just a few minutes. Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com. everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend Jackson is in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in Brooklyn Center. And we want to continue to talk with you about what you're expecting from the Chauvin trial. In fact, the defense and the prosecution will be presenting their closing arguments tomorrow, and then the jury is going to go into deliberation. Then they will be sequestered. Then they will be able to deliberate. What did the judge say? Hope for short, pack for long. Wow. We'll see. We'll see what all of this means. We've got a tremendous panel to talk with us about what's happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Brooklyn Center. We were honored to have Dimmick Bryant, the big brother of Daunte Wright, hearing his strength and his clarity. They want a murder indictment and they want a murder conviction for the killing of Daunte Wright. They want that. And we were pulling from this New York Times article that shows something really stunning. That since March 29th, which is the day before the trial opened, 64 Americans have been killed by police. That's an average of three per day, everybody. Half of them have been Black and Latino. And um, what is going on with the police? What is going on with the police? Have you observed the police, the barricades around Kimberly Potter's home, the officer who killed Daunte Wright? She said she thought she was holding her taser, but she was holding a gun. As she shouted, taser, 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 more and more people are saying that even Pat Robertson said that this is he didn't believe it. They had a taser, or at least a mock-up of a taser and the mock-up of a gun. And he said on his set, he said, this is ridiculous. And they need to be indicted. They need to be convicted. They need to be put under the jail. Pat Robertson said that, but he said because police, you're undermining yourselves. So we want to hear from you. 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. Reverend Jackson's Twitter poll asked this question. It states that only one juror, only one CK, needs to doubt that Derek Chauvin intended to kill George Floyd. Will Chauvin be found guilty or not? The news stories are coming out that Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Brooklyn Center, and indeed Chicago, all over the country, people are on edge. So we want to talk about that with you today on Keep Up Alive, 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. Let's talk about the Derek Chauvin trial. Have you been impressed? Were you impressed by the prosecution's case? Were you impressed by the defense of Derek Chauvin? What did you think about him taking the fifth? So much to talk about when we get back on the other side before Spike Moss, a brilliant organizer on the ground in Minneapolis, St. Paul for more than 50 years. He's going to give us a lay of the land before he goes because he invited Reverend Jackson up there and he and Pastor McAfee, and they have had quite a time, along with the great Auntie Maxine. She was up there too. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes.
Priceless and precious, important and essential.
Hey, how's everybody doing today? Thank you so much for. I know, Vicky. I turn off the sound sometimes during the break. Yeah. So I'm not always gonna keep the sound on. Let you all hear us talk during the break because sometimes I have some other things that I don't want to go out there. Okay, Douglas, how you doing from Cincinnati? From the Cincy. Dawn, Carol, Willie, D. Ray, Veronica, Gloria, Vicky, Marnie. Carol, actually, Marnie is broadcasting us today. Renee, Diana, Keith Fluid, and Benjamin Hooks. A lot of people want to weigh in, right? Reverend Yeri,
Good morning.
how are you?
I'm
Thank
well. How are
you.
you?
Got some extra guests I didn't expect to have. We had Dante Wright's brother, Dimmick, his big brother, Dimmick Bryant, with us. Okay.
I was able to hear that conversation.
Yeah. You know, you just don't quite know. We have another call coming in, sweetie. It's a lot to do.
Keep hope alive.
Yeah. So, and of course, we've got attorney C.K. Hoffler. We've got Spike Moss with us. And Frank Watkins, thank goodness, we're going to lock him in.
Jerry.
We have a lot of people who are calling in. But first, I want you to set the table for us, Mr. Moss, and I'm going to let you go so you can go on and be with the person who you invited up there. Thank you for taking care of him while he's there.
Oh yeah.
He's so glad to be there. You know, he wants to be of service. You know, he's going to do that until he gets out of here.
Well, it's like I told you, he's been of service here for so long. I don't want people to lose sight of that.
Well, you've been very kind. You've been so kind. Let's get Mr. Patillo.
That's the only one who's going to take the voicemail. I'm going to try again.
Okay, no worries. We're good.
Okay.
So we're good. Okay?
All right. Coming up in a minute.
Thank you so much, everybody. I have a question for you when we get on the other side of the break.
Okay.
Mr. Moss, are you gonna be with Reverend Early tomorrow?
I'll be with him every time he moves.
Okay, well then I will. Well, let me know if you'll have any time to be on the show in the morning at all.
No, I will talk to you even if I'm doing the phone in the car. It doesn't matter. We want people to know.
Okay.
We want people's support. And we're trying to hold the community together at the same time we're going through this racism. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you know, I'm really surprised because this is, you know, the station that I'm on, you know, it is progressive and that's the white audience. And this is the first time they're hearing your stories.
Coming up in 10
And so,
seconds.
hold on one moment, please. We're coming up. Okay. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. Sunday, April 18th, 2021. Tomorrow, we will hear the closing arguments of the prosecution and the defense of the Derek Chauvin murder trial. What's going to happen, everybody? People are on pins and needles. And then we came into this New York Times story that shows that just from March 29th, just before they opened the trial, there have been an average of 3 police killings of citizens a day. 64. Half of them have been Black and Latino. Wow, what's going on? And then we see the protection, the cement girders, and the fence that have been built around the home of Kimberly Potter, the woman, the former officer who we saw shoot Dante Wright to death. She said she thought she was holding a taser. And she was holding a gun. And she said, oh, blank, I shot him. Wow. Does anyone really believe that she didn't know that she was holding a gun as opposed to a taser? Even Reverend Pat Robertson said that your story doesn't hold water with me, and you all need to be put under the jail for all that you're doing to police and to the citizenry. So it's very interesting times that we're living in. And so joining Spike Moss, brilliant organizer, who's brought Reverend Jackson up to Minneapolis, St. Paul, he and Pastor McAfee. We've got attorney C.K. Hoffler, who's been helping to lay out the legal case for us here on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Of course, she's the president of the National Bar Association, more than 65,000 Black lawyers, the largest and oldest Black Bar Association in the world. Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire, senior pastor of Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, of course, vice president of Rainbow Push, also a lawyer, brilliant preacher, theologian, does so many things. Frank Watkins, who has been doing this with Reverend, he's been Reverend Jackson's communications director for more than 50 years, among other jobs. Can't wait to get his thoughts too. But let me start with you, Spike Moss, because I know, excuse me, that you are with Reverend Jackson today, and I know you're going to have to leave us shortly. But would you please set the table for this second hour audience about what is happening, what it looks like, what it feels like? Has Minneapolis St. Paul become militarized? Do we see a lot of police on the ground? What are people expecting? What are they feeling? Spike Moss, please talk to us.
Well, first of all, I did make it a point to take Jesse to the courthouse and the government building so he could actually witness the militarizing of those buildings. I also took him to Brooklyn Center where he could see they did the same thing for the precinct. But then I took him back to where the National Guard was, and he's seen the large force of the National Guard overwhelming here. And all you're hearing is what we need to do and never what they shouldn't do. I would also add to it, through this pain and the sorrow and being traumatized all the way down to our little children who are watching on TV, not just during this time, but forever in this state. You mentioned the fact of how many people have been killed by police. I would go back maybe 15 to 16 years when they started finally giving those facts. The police then were averaging over 1,020-some people a year they were shooting, but they weren't giving you the breakdown, and it wasn't on the national news, so oftentimes you didn't even know it was us. Now finally, you see it, and it looks like it's brand new, but it's really not. The last 15, 16 years, they were killing more than 1,000-some people, and that doesn't even include the ones they wounded. So when you look at the grief here, like I said, I felt it was going to happen, and Jesse did put smiles on their faces, and they did want to hug him, and they did want to touch him, and they did want to tell him thank you. And I think they needed that break because they've traumatized 24 hours a day here. I live in North Minneapolis. The main street is Broadway. All you see up there is militarizing. You see the armored cars. You see the military with all their war guns. We ain't seen no police up there yet. We are in an encampment. We're forced to live in an encampment that they created by murdering us. And then you put who's got to be in by what time on the people who are the victim of the situation. And you tell us, well, you're going to have to be in at 7. You're going to have to be in by 8. Everything is pointed at the people who represent the victims of this situation, and they're going scot-free. The other thing the lawyer made crystal clear, we've seen all that on TV. They dragged the same cement barriers that they did for the courthouse around her home. They put the squad cars up on her property like it was the precinct. And then you're going to come with the fencing like she's the victim and you need to protect her. So it's not just you didn't give her the correct charges. You're doing it the way you did the average one of those white people who were coming in places and assaulting us. How they took them white boys to their favorite place to eat, get them their favorite drink before they take them in. It's the same thing. They pamper themselves like, good job done, you killed another one we don't have to kill. But the pain here is overwhelming. When I say overwhelming, it's on the face of our people everywhere. And I heard Mac when he talked about when the black people turn out. One of the things that happened was Black Lives Matter came to town. They have a history of drawing white people. When black people in this town stand up, that's when you see these real rebellions. And they will stand up if this verdict don't come back. To Mac's point, they will stand up in great numbers, and they will come out of their homes because they always have here, even though the world didn't know what was going on here. They will be something else. If you say not guilty, you will see them, and they will not follow no Black Lives Matter or nobody else. They will follow their hearts and their pain, their suffering, their frustration, and they will be extremely angry and extremely mad out of their heads because they've never, ever witnessed justice coming their way. And this Mississippi up north state, they've never seen it, never witnessed it, and they don't understand what they're playing with as the power structure here. If all you're concerned about is your property, get ready to lose some more.
Hmm. Wow. Let me go to a couple of these callers before you. Would you like to give us a final thought before you go, Spike Moss?
It's the same thing, and I'll
Hmm.
do my best to keep up with your dad and try to get him in at a decent time. Thank
Thank you.
God for him and that he's done what he's always done. He's come to Minnesota's aid. He stood up for Minnesota as long as I've known him. And I thank God for him and that he's here and his operation is here. And I thank God his operation is down there in Quincy, Illinois, with that college student who was a track star that shouldn't have been beaten that way and shouldn't have been choked that way. I thank God that you're able to get there. And let me say something else. I'm not part of PUSH, but to your listeners, please hear them when they say, if you want people to move around on your behalf, send your donations. Be helpful because they're not going to finance our revolution. Send your donations. I'm asking you, send your donations. Help your people stand up and get to those cities and those states where they need to go. It takes money to fly, money for a room, money for food. You know, you got to buy your own movement. This should be your movement, no one else's. It should be yours. You're the one dying the most. Y'all have a great day. I'll do the best I can for your father.
Whew, bless your heart. Spike Moss, everybody, he's been doing so much work. The reason we know of a Prince and a Jimmy Jam and a Terry Lewis and all of that great talent, Sounds of Blackness, Gary Hines, the person who has gone in to save their lives to create the talent shows, to create the platforms so that they could have their talents displayed, whether they were academic or artistic. This is the person who's been on the ground with our young people, our young girls who needed to know they were beautiful. He's hosted the pageants, he's owned the Miss Black America pageants, all of that. He's done so much work for so many years and has not sought any attention. He's just sought to lift up our young people and all of our people. And we just thank God for you, Spike Moss, today. Thank you for all that you've done and continue to do.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Love you much. All right. Before I get to you, Pastor Yeary and Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Reverend Watkins, let me go through a couple of these callers at least. Woody, what's on your mind? You're calling from California?
Yes. Good morning to the panel. Good morning to Reverend Jackson and you, Santita.
Good morning.
Yes, I had a question for the panel. I was listening to this Christian radio talk show host, Frank Pastoral, and he read a couple of articles. One of the articles was talking about the criminal background of George Floyd, Dante Wright, and I think Mike Brown. And one of the things they said in the article was that Dante Wright robbed some young lady of $800 at gunpoint. And I guess the point was that we're making these young men to be heroes with this criminal background. And then the other article he read was that if the young men would just comply, they would still be alive. I was just curious as to what the panel's response would be to those questions.
Okay, your elevator pitch, CK, and then you, attorney, Reverend Attorney Todd Yeary, then you, Frank Watkins, Attorney CK.
Well, first of all, that's an excellent question. And in the case of, no one is condoning criminal behavior. Whether it doesn't matter, wrong is wrong in terms of criminal behavior, in terms of robbing someone at gunpoint and what they did in the past. But the question is not that. That's one of those red flags. That's like, look here and not there. The question is, because of what they did in the past, did they deserve to die today at the hands of law enforcement with excessive use of force? Those are completely separate issues. A lot of people make mistakes, but they don't get killed for something that's not related to the mistake they made. That's number one. Number two, that is a mere deflection, to deflect the guilt, to take the guilt off the people who are at fault, which in this case would be the police officers, law enforcement, and to put it on the victim. That's wrong, and more wrong. And by the way, there's not a lot of evidence of Black people surviving if they comply. If they don't comply, they die. If they comply, they die. If they partially comply, they die. If they partially don't comply, they die. So this notion that if they had just complied, we saw the shooting of a 13-year-old in Chicago recently. He complied. A lot of people comply, and they die. So that's just a red herring. And what needs to be the focus is the conduct of law enforcement when they are killing Black and brown people over and over and over again. Policing reform, not about the compliance of the client, because compliance doesn't mean living for Black people when they're stopped by law enforcement.
Reverend Yuri?
Well, to the compliance point, let's go back and look at the video at 9 minutes and 29 seconds. From the time George Floyd said, "I will get in the car," he stopped fighting. Derek Chauvin continued to keep his knee in George Floyd's neck for another 5 minutes. So clearly, the argument that compliance leads to survival is not true. We've seen it. Number two, the assumption that because there's an allegation, it justifies mistreatment under the law is false. The state has two things at its disposal. One is the burden to prove guilt, not to presume it. Number two, the state has the right to legally take someone's life. Those two things have to be held in a necessary tension. Otherwise, you have what we see across communities in this country, is that police forces are occupiers running paramilitary organizations with retired military equipment from combat zones, using it as psychological warfare against the constitutional freedoms of peoples of color. We've seen it in Minneapolis and Brooklyn Center. We saw it in Baltimore after Freddie Gray. We saw it in Ferguson after Mike Brown. We've seen it in Louisville, Kentucky after Breonna Taylor when the National Guard killed David McAtee, shooting pepper balls and running into his shop. He comes out legally able to defend his territory, took a fatal bullet. So let's be real clear on what this is and what this ain't. I'm real careful that white people that don't have to wake up and wonder if they're going to survive for being white, I do not allow them to tell me what I ought to do because I have to worry how I'm going to survive being Black.
Reverend Frank Watkins.
Well, I can't improve on the legal arguments. I think they covered those very well. In baseball, if you struck out 3 times coming up in the 9th inning with the bases loaded and you're 3 runs behind, it doesn't mean you couldn't have hit a home run in the 9th.
Amen to that. Well, thank you, Woody, for being with us today. And we want to go to Fred. Fred,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sweetie. Thank you so much for being with us today. Fred, what's on your mind today?
For this one, I want to look at this from a perspective of an inner city kid of 20 years old. That would be me 50 years ago. This is Los Angeles Police Department. This is inner city policing at its the way it's done on the streets. When they handcuffed Dante Wright, the video doesn't show, at least the ones I've seen, doesn't seem to clean through, but they should have handcuffed him. Instead, one officer, at least one officer, and I believe the female officer, the shooter, comes over and takes the cuffs off, or has the other officer take the cuffs off. Now, I understand that she was training, and I'm assuming he's the officer that's being trained. Well, when they released the cuffs, or at least took them loose, Dante ran. Okay, that's what the Los Angeles Police Department has been doing for years. I don't know if they do it now. I've been stopped in a while, but that's what they do for suspects, to give them that excuse to shoot. This was poor training, and actually it was street justice. She didn't waste no time getting her gun out that she called a taser. Then she hollers. Then she says when she comes back from the car, she says warrant. Well, that put everybody on notice. Then she says taser, taser, taser. Then I noticed the other officers get out of the line of fire. Mm-hmm. Then she points the gun, or she says the taser is right in front of her in the right hand on video. Her body cam touches it. See, shows it. She can't see the color of it, the difference in the color. The weight is different, the feel is different, the color is different, the trigger is different, and the way you activate it. You to activate a 9mm, you got to pull the slide back or pull the hammer back. A taser is electronically. Nobody's pointed that out. That's different. Also, she's a captain, and she resigned. I was wondering why she didn't retire. Well, they say she's only 48. Well, the Brooklyn Center Police Department, the city's going to have to identify her, indemnify her And then she said they say she's the union president. Then there's her legal defense. Now you put all of these and connect all the dots and all of this. I can't see an accident in this, Santita. You want to respond?
Hmm. I tell you what, I cannot get over the fact that taser, 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 and she's holding a gun.
Right, and her body, she has her right arm extended with the gun
Hmm.
out, saying that, looking at the gun. She'll argue that she's looking at the suspect, but the gun is right there, right in front of her. And even Fox said the gun weighs 3 times as much as the taser.
I mean, she knows that. I
She
mean,
knew
I
that. She
mean,
knew everything.
and I have to tell you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, I it just all feels very, very. She is someone who had more than a quarter century of experience as a
28
police
years.
officer. Okay, so she knew. I mean, even her when I read her her letter of resignation to you on my radio show a few days ago, you said first of all a lawyer wrote this. You,
Yes.
she, attorney Hoffler, stay right there, Fred. She said an attorney wrote this, and then when you hear all of her other credentials, Fred, um, CK, what is this? And even Pat Robertson said she needs to be put under the jail. He had either was a real gun and a real taser or a mock-up of a real gun and a real taser, and a mock-up of a gun and a taser on his radio on his television show. He said the weight is different. There's no way with her experience that she didn't know that she was holding a gun and not a taser.
Santita,
Yes.
uh, we'll be talking about this later on, but I know quite a bit about how the inside of city government works.
Hmm.
31 years with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, high-powered executive. This whole thing was scripted. This whole thing, in my opinion,
Hmm.
was well thought out. Now, I've been a juror. I told you this before on a death penalty case in 2007 here in California, downtown Los Angeles. It wouldn't fit. It wouldn't fit first-degree murder, but it should be a murder charge on this. I don't know if the prosecution can prove it, but this whole thing in her mind was well scripted and well thought out, in my opinion.
Well, then very, very quickly, CK, what would be the impact if the family gets a financial settlement before there's an indictment or anything? Because now, I mean, that it just seems like that kind of undercuts the case. I'm not saying that people shouldn't get some compensation, but oh,
Well, Santita, it shouldn't undercut the case. They're completely different issues. The criminal case is holding someone criminally liable for a crime. It's just that simple.
mhm.
And this second degree manslaughter, that is an insult. There should be, and I'm persuaded that as things unfold, there may be other charges. Maybe I'm hopeful is a better word because I don't have access to any of the evidence. All of us don't because the case is being built right now. But I do think that a civil, in all cases, there's always a civil settlement of one sort or another. If there's usually a civil lawsuit that's filed, and either it's tried and won or lost, or it's settled. So there really shouldn't be an impact. The impact that people see is other people filling in the blanks. Well, the family got money, the family should be satisfied. There's not a penny, there's not a single amount of money that can satisfy you when you've lost your loved one.
True.
People are delusional. You would throw back the money and then some and be homeless to have another minute, another hour, another day with a loved one. And I think it's always very curious when people are saying, well, the family's greedy. They've lost a life
Hmm.
at the hands of brutality. So it's not a question of greed. That's what this system of justice gives people who are harmed. You've got a civil recourse and you've got the state that will decide, or the
Okay.
feds that decide to bring criminal charges.
Okay.
So there should not be any correlation.
Well, let's talk about it on the other side of the break with the callers, with you, and what are you expecting? Will Derek Chauvin have to go to jail, or will he be exonerated? Back with more people alive in just a minute. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We're streaming live on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page, the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and of course on my own show tomorrow morning, we will be talking with Dante Wright's brother, Dimmick Bryant. Can't wait to hear his story and their story. Reverend Jackson is in Minneapolis, St. Paul today. So everybody, please, free remain free. The reason we're able to deploy push staff and volunteers downstate in Illinois, where a young African American track star was choked by a man, a white man who was 250 pounds, et cetera, fighting for her. The reason we're able to go up to Minneapolis, St. Paul is because of you. We need your support. So please go to rainbowpush.org, become a member. We need your donations. We need your support. And call us throughout the week at 773 Freedom, 773 Freedom. We need your support. Help push before you need help from push. That's what we have always been told by people, that we're trying to help you before we need your help from you. All right, everybody, we've got Attorney C.K. Hoffler, President of the National Bar Association, and Reverend Todd Urey, Esquire, Senior Pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, one of the nation's iconic churches. He's also Vice President of Push, and she's the chairperson of Rainbow Push. Let me just say that. And Reverend Jackson's right hand for more than 50 years. His communications director, Reverend Frank Watkins. In fact, he and former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. have the 20th anniversary edition of their book, A More Perfect Union, Advancing New American Rights, that will be out within the next few months. And we cannot wait to have them on to talk about that. Reverend Watkins, you were making you were speculating a lot during the break. What's on your mind?
Well, I was simply saying that we're focusing on the police shooting and so forth, but back up as to why he was stopped. He was apparently stopped because he had an air freshener hanging from his mirror. And as you pointed out, I guess this is a new law that they have because people were hanging their graduation tassels, whatever, from the mirror, and this allegedly blocked their view. And so that's the reason he was stopped. So it went from his being stopped for a air freshener hanging from his mirror to being killed. But Santita, all of this killing has given me a new interpretation of Reverend Al's "no justice, no peace." I believe that justice can never be achieved with convictions in the courts, with big financial settlements, or anything else, as long as blacks end up dead. As long as blacks keep getting killed in clear instances by the police, as in the 9-minute and 29-second case of Derek Coleman, in the split-second case, like the police killing of the 13-year-old Adam Toledo in Chicago, in mass killings like the 8 blacks murdered in Mother Emanuel, or individual killings by vigilantes like in Brunswick, Georgia. There can be no justice and no peace as long as black people are indiscriminately killed and end up dead because of their race or color. Justice requires life. Justice requires that black lives matter, not just black deaths matter. The only thing courts and the law can bring us is accountability, but not justice. Justice requires that people live. Death can only require legal accountability for the person or persons who did the killing.
Amen to that. Let me go to you, Don. Don, where are you calling from?
I'm actually in Daytona Beach.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful hearing your voice. Thank you for tuning in this morning.
Hey, I enjoy your show every Sunday morning.
Thank you.
And I'm speaking from the white perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, Mr. Wright was pulled over for an expired tag and an air freshener. I've been pulled over for an expired tag myself, but my question isn't even that. My question is...
And you live to tell the tale. That's interesting.
Right. I didn't try to run because I had a warrant. But anyway, my question for you guys is...
Well, then, no, but then let me ask you this, because I certainly want you to ask your question. But even if he tried to run, do you think that he should have been killed?
No, I think she was in over her head. I think she should have never been in the position she was in. Had probably been graduated there socially,
Not
and she was
necessarily.
obviously over her head. And she shouldn't have been training anybody. She should have been trained. And when you're out there as a patrol person, still training people after 26 years, there's something wrong.
Mm.
She should have been upstairs in an office somewhere by then if she was really good. But anyway, my question is, and I've been hearing your questions, and I watched the Floyd trial and the video, unfortunately, because those are things you don't unsee. But my question would be, because you've been asking the question of everybody else, my question would be to you and your panel, do you think that Derek Chauvin leaned on him, knew he was dying, kept leaning to make sure he died?
Well, let me ask
And if
you.
you believe that,
Yes.
then he's guilty. If you believe that he was being brutal, didn't know when to give up. By the way, I did find out that knowing when to give up is not even part of their training, which it ought to be. If you believe he didn't know when to give up and it was done without the intention of sitting there and kneeling on him and watching him get so bad he knew he was going to die and he made sure he died, this really upsets me too. He's guilty.
Well, Don,
but
let
if
me
you don't
ask
believe
you.
that, he's going to get off.
Well, Don, let me ask you. I mean, because you watched the trial,
Right.
and you heard the onlookers say, you know, you're enjoying this because he was grinding his knee into his neck, and he did feel him lose. He felt him not move anymore.
He felt him not wiggle more, right?
At all. After 5
Right.
minutes, he was out of it. He was gone. Do you think? What do you think about Derek Chauvin? Do you think that he meant to kill him? I mean,
No.
because
Santita,
I want Don to answer, and then I want you, Frank Watkins, to engage, Don.
Right. From what I watched and him battling verbally with the people back and forth in the crowd, I think that he was intent on restraining him, and he wasn't intent on killing him. And I think he crossed the line because of poor police knowing when to give up training, and he was showing who was in charge. But I don't think he intended it to go that far. I wouldn't be surprised if he intended it to be pass out unconsciousness like wrestlers do.
So he didn't
but
mean it.
I don't think he meant to kill him.
Okay, hold on, Don. I'm now Frank Watkins, because this is the one juror, and no one's castigating you, Don. It's your perspective really does matter, and this is how that one person, Frank Watkins, Reverend Watkins, one person. All it takes is one.
Well,
to hang up this
Derek Chauvin he had his knee on his neck, but there were two other officers that had their bodies on George Floyd as well. And Chauvin was taunting him, you know. He was saying he couldn't breathe and so forth, and Chauvin was saying, well, get up and get in the car with three people on top of him. I'll defer to the lawyers in terms of whether, given the indictments that have been brought against him, the three charges that have been brought against him, whether intent is required to convict him. It's my understanding all they have to prove is that he contributed to George Floyd's death.
Okay, very quickly, your elevator pitch before we go to some of these callers. Attorney C.K. Hoffler. Attorney Hoffler? Well, then let me go to you, Todd.
Okay, good morning.
Okay,
yes,
yeah,
my elevator pitch is this. The gentleman caller is just like the jurors. I mean, I think that the questions that he posed, while I may disagree with certain things that he saw, everybody's has a right to see what they see. And I think that for me, when I looked at that, I think it was intentional. I just read it completely differently. And I dare say that there could be a racial divide in terms of how that is interpreted. But it doesn't really matter what we see. It's what those jurors are sensing based on all of the evidence. I think that at some point we heard from law enforcement that said he needed to stop. And he kept on more and more, even when his colleagues were saying, look, maybe. So I think once he knew and people were saying stop his own. He may not have had to listen to the crowd, but when your own colleagues are saying that should resonate on some level. And he continued because it was intentional. From my standpoint, he intended to kill him, and I think he had a relationship with him. He knew him, not a relationship, but he knew him previously, and that was what he was trying to do.
His colleague said he had no pulse.
So we think he intended to kill him in public on TV?
Santita, here's the issue.
Now, let me just clarify. He had no idea that he was going to be on TV. Law enforcement, when they're engaging in misconduct, they're not thinking about this because a lot of times they turn off their cameras. They know the odds are going to support them because in 99% of the cases, there's not going to be an indictment. There's not going to be a conviction. There's not going to be any television. This was just another black man that he killed. And that is his perspective, and that is the perspective of a lot of law enforcement.
Okay.
So I think that's the lens that you have to look at this issue through.
Okay, very quickly, before I go back to the callers, Reverend Urey.
So Derek Chauvin, under color of law, had a duty, an actual legal obligation to George Floyd. You've heard in testimony this, in your custody is the same as being in your care. So the fact that he knew or did not know does not absolve him that he had a duty because he was operating under the authority of the badge on his chest and the power that's given to him by the state. So that's not a pass. The question becomes determining which charge they're going to come back with has to do with state of mind. Is he culpably negligent? I think that's a minimum because from the time George Floyd stopped, quote unquote, resisting, there were several minutes that passed. That's number one. Number two, reckless disregard, depraved mind, right? Being totally insensitive to the obligations, that raises the scope and the scale. So you're looking at everything from a range of up to 10 years to up to 40 years. I have argued, having met with Reverend Jackson when we went to Minneapolis right after George Floyd was killed and the Attorney General took over the case, is that Minnesota law actually has an interpretation that could have added an aggravating charge that could have made this a first degree charge. And it is whether or not he was moved against his will, held against his will after complying, and then died. That would be under the kidnapping statute with a broad interpretation. So what we're looking at is even the charges that probably should have been levied, he's getting the benefit of the badge. And now we have to make sure that the duty that goes with it does not give him a pass on being held accountable for the death of George Floyd. And to the point, other officers are also going to come up. This evidence is going to come back for everybody. And while he may not have known he was going to be on television, we've seen body camera evidence from multiple officers. He knew those were rolling. And that was going to be the perspective that would ultimately hold him accountable.
Let me go to Jerry. Jerry, what's on your mind today?
Well, it's very interesting, perspective on learning. And first of all, I want to say good morning, Santita, and to Reverend Jackson. Thank you for all you do. And here in Tulsa, we really appreciate the Reverend came here a few years ago.
Oh, I can't hear you now. Okay.
You can't, I'm sorry.
Okay, now I can.
Can you hear me? Okay,
yes,
I turned my speakerphone off.
Okay,
sorry about that.
Very good.
But thank you. You guys really do a good job. So God bless you. But I agree with the gentleman who just spoke. I was a security guard. This was just egregious. You could see it written all over. I watched the video when this happened last year, and there's a responsibility there, and Chauvin is the guilt is still there on his face, in my opinion. And I really believe that there will be a guilty verdict come back.
But Jerry, let me ask you this: having heard Don, and I appreciated him calling in because he said, "I'm giving you." Interestingly, he said, "I'm giving you the white perspective." He's giving us a perspective from a white man, and I can appreciate that. And we need to hear that perspective because for him, there is reasonable doubt, if you will. He feels that, no, I don't think he really meant to do that. I think he didn't know when to stop. There's still, of course, they're giving him some space. Now, what I see is someone who had a personal relationship with him, and this was a
Hmm.
very personal murder. That's what it looked like to me. They worked at
Well,
the same club. I mean, this is conjecture on my part, but I saw the way when people said, "You look like you're enjoying this," and he then would grind his knee into his neck. It felt
well,
very personal, Jerry.
well, Santana,
Let me give
I
Jerry
would
30
say
seconds, and then you, and
as
then you,
a,
Reverend Watkins.
again, as a, engaged in a situation like there's a lot of adrenaline going, but when his colleagues tapped him or made the inference of, hey, maybe we need to draw back or draw down on this, or
Mhm.
and then when there was no pulse, I think at that point that as a professionally trained cop, that there should have been a different track taken. But I'd like to say this. I'm a minister as well, and I'd like to address Pat Robinson, which I was glad to hear him go there. But I've listened to some of the other talk shows, particularly Francis and Friends, the Swaggart Ministry.
Yes, I watched it.
And really, these are problematic, and I do agree with where you guys were touching on that. I'd like to get that out over there too before you go on. That's our biggest problem, and as you know, Santita, being in family ministry, and we all know the scriptures, and God is not cool or complicit with this, and I'm just really praying for these evangelical platforms like Francis and Friends to wake up, because they are complicit with this. They are
Well, they
promoting
are.
it,
Well,
and yeah,
Mr.
and
Jerry, Reverend, if I may say this, because if you notice, his defense ultimately was of the police.
right,
He said the police need to get on top of this because if they don't get this right, they're going to lose all authority. Ultimately,
absolutely,
he was defending the police. I don't think
yeah,
that should be lost on us. I'm not mad at him, and I appreciate what he said. But he said, if you guys don't get it together, you're not going to have any control. Stay right there,
yeah.
Reverend Pastor, because we can speak to you during the break. But 30 seconds, Frank Watkins, Reverend Watkins.
Yes, there were 3 charges brought against him. Maybe I didn't understand what the lawyers were saying about the 3 charges. It's my understanding that intention is not required for his conviction regarding the 3 charges. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I could be wrong. So I'm asking the lawyers
Well, during the break, we'll get right to it. In the meantime, I'm up against y'all break. Got to pay these bills. Keep up live with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Back in just a few minutes.
It's hard to find. Don't give up. Just be strong. Keep the faith and hold on.
Okay. Very quickly.
Yeah,
Reverend
my
Jerry, stay
understanding
right
is
there.
all he needed to do was contribute.
Okay,
Yeah.
CK and Reverend
Yeah,
Esquire.
so state of mind has to do with why there is no first degree charge, which requires malice.
Yeah.
The second degree charge requires that he didn't necessarily have the intent to cause the death, but that while he was doing something else, causing injury and harm, it led to the death, right? So it's unintentional murder. Third degree is what they call depraved mind. That's where he's intentional, but he's intending to put his knee in the neck in a way
Because
that
I want
would
to
be
I want to
dangerous
get another
and
clamp,
without regard
and I need your expertise. You understand
to
clamps, right?
to human life, right? So that's where the when should he have relented, when should he have taken his knee off the neck? That's the police officer testimony, right? Because they're going to this at that point. There's a depraved mind, so you have to have the need to apply whatever force all the way through until the force is no longer needed, and then the manslaughter is just what they're calling culpable negligence, right? He acted in a way that a reasonable person should have known that putting his knee on the neck of George Floyd would either cause bodily injury or death. And so those are the distinctions. He doesn't have to have malice, he doesn't have to intend it, but there are variations in terms of states of mind that kind of go to the differences in the degrees of the charges.
Reverend Jerry, did that help you at all?
And that's what he was charged with. Because they didn't think, they knew it was difficult to prove, intent in terms of police, right?
Right. But you can get to first degree if there's an aggravating factor. So when they pull George Floyd out of the vehicle, they do not sit him back on the ground, which is where he was before they tried to put him in. They laid him in a prone position, which we heard a lot of evidence about that being a very dangerous position to put him in while he's handcuffed behind his back. The argument could have been made that putting him in that position against his will, whether they moved him a mile or a foot, could have triggered the kidnapping statute, which would have led to an aggravating charge. That would have been a reach, I think, with the jury uncertainty. But I think it is certainly a factor that they had to weigh, and then they came away with the charges that they did.
Pastor Jerry, did that help you at all? Any of that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. Santita, I pray that there's thousands of listeners, people on your live calls. I mean, they're so informative. Yes, indeed.
Well, and I hope you'll tune into my show in the morning. I'm on the largest progressive talk radio station in the country. I do morning drive. It would be very early, but we're on from 6 to 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, which is 4 to 6 your time. And we stream on Facebook, but we're on WCPT 820. And I do morning drive in Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's one of the cities I'm in.
Well, we need to get you on here in Tulsa. We need some awakening in the Greenwood Centennial that's going on here. And there's a lot of good things happening. So we certainly appreciate your work in Rev. We love him here. We love you all there in Chicago. And keep up the good work. And God bless Rev. We're glad to have him. Thank God for him. And you take good care of your dad. He's a good man.
Well, you know what? I stand behind my mother on that one. she
you're just like her. She's beautiful. And you're beautiful. And you and her look just, you're twins. I mean, you're her mini-me.
Oh, my gosh.
God bless you guys.
God bless you.
Guys are doing.
Stand by, everybody. Well, thank you, Pastor Jerry. We've got about 30 seconds apiece, okay, to close. Start with you, CK. Hey, everybody, please give Rainbow Push your support. Reverend Jackson is in Minneapolis, St. Paul, along with his staff, and we're also in Quincy, Illinois, fighting a similar battle. A young Black woman was assaulted by a track star, assaulted by a white man more than twice her size. And so we are all over the place, but we need your support in order to make that happen, in order to support the people who need our support. So please go to rainbowpush.org and contribute, become a part of the movement, and call us at 773-FREEDOM throughout the week. The chair of our board, who's also the president of the National Bar Association, in 30 seconds, what do you need us to do, Attorney C.K. Hoffler?
Well, what I'd like everyone to do is to pray that there is a just result in the Derek Chauvin trial, because what happens in the Derek Chauvin trial will have an impact on Daunte Wright's case. It is my sincere hope that the jury does remember what it sees. They need to trust their eyes and not be distracted by all this other stuff. I think that's critically important. And then we need to just remember, we need to vote.
Absolutely.
We need to vote, and elected officials who are going to put forth the agendas that are important to our community. And finally, we've got to push our senators to support the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. There needs to be a complete and comprehensive overhaul of policing in this country.
Frank Watkins, 30 seconds.
I remember how excited I was about the possibility of getting a driver's license. I started a countdown list when I was 12 that I checked off every day until I would be 16 and could get my driver's license. I wonder how does a Black parent feel and what they are thinking about their 15-year-old son that to get a driver's license in less than a year.
Fear. Reverend Todd Urey, Esquire, 30 seconds. They belong to you.
Well, thank you for the conversation. This week, we are watching what Chief Justice Roger Taney meant in the Dred Scott decision that a black man had no rights that a white person was bound to respect. That is the George Floyd trial. So we have to watch, we have to prepare, we have to engage, and we have to, as Reverend would say, keep hope alive until we get to that place called justice.
Amen to that, everybody. And throughout the week, please continue to reach out to us. Our offices are open. Of course, we have limited uh, capacity because of COVID, but we are open and we've been open throughout this pandemic doing the work. Please support Rainbow Push. Become a member. Go to rainbowpush.org or call 773 Freedom and reach out to Betty Magnus. She'll be helpful to you. So many people we need your support as we get out and support. Reverend is in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and of course, on my own show on Chicago's Progressive Talk and AM 950 Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We'll be talking about this all week following this trial, following the deliberations, and I will be speaking with Dante Wright's brother. So honored to be able to speak with Demick Bryant tomorrow morning on the Santita Jackson Show. I love you, everybody. And until next week and throughout the weekend, always, always, always keep hope alive.
Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com.
Beautiful people, I'm going to let you all go. Thank you all so much for my popping. I'm going to have to get rid of my little clamp. I love you all so much. Thank you for being with us today. And I'll see you tomorrow on WCPT 820 in Chicago. And of course, here, everybody stream live on Reverend Jackson's page, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. And we'll be talking about this. Everybody's waiting on the verdict. I'll be speaking with Dante Wright's brother tomorrow. We want to know what's happening on the ground. I don't think that we're getting a fair representation, truly, of the tension in the air. Reverend Yeary and Reverend Watkins, to read this New York Times story to show that averages out that 3 Americans have been killed every day since March 29th by the police. One has to wonder what is going on. What is going on? And if George Floyd is the beginning or the end of it, certainly it's a continuation. So we'll see what's going to happen. I want to get some final thoughts from you before we go. Reverend Watkins, and then you, Reverend Erie. Reverend Watkins, what should we be on the lookout for this week?
I'm sorry?
What should we be on the lookout for this week? I mean, you heard Don. Don was representative of the reasonable doubt.
Absolutely. And so there's nothing else to look forward to or look toward is the decision in the Derek Chauvin case, the closing arguments and the decision by the trial jury.
Wow. Reverend Erie?
Well, just remember the state has to get 12 votes. The defense only needs 1 to counter a unanimous verdict. And so it comes down to who's sitting in the jury pool. I think the most interesting piece for me would not have been so much the evidence at the trial. It shows what we thought it would show. It really is what happened during voir dire when they were questioning the prospective jurors to determine who were going to be the 12 citizens who determined the fate of Derek Chauvin and whether there would be justice for George Floyd. So let's watch, let's prepare, let's stay engaged, and let's keep fighting until we get to that place called justice.
Everybody, God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow morning on the Santita Jackson Show. And keep a lookout. Go to rainbowpush.org. We will be keeping you updated on Reverend Jackson's activities in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Wow, there's a lot that's going on. So love you so much. Thank you all for being so faithful. Love you, love you, love you. Andre and Daphne and Daryl and Mel and Leon and Kenneth and Renee, all of you. Hannah. So many of you, Yolanda, Jean, Jarvis, Yolanda. Thank you all, everybody. I wish I could stay, but I've got to run. But love you so much. See you in the morning on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless.